I turn it on? Yeah, I turned me on. Okay. All right. Well, chapter 5, verse 2. And this is where we're at. So we come out of that section where they were just, they were actually making love at the end there. I don't know if you missed that bit, but that's what they were doing. Well, that is what they were doing. But obviously, it was that perfect communion of the bride and the bridegroom. And he was singing her praises, wasn't he? How beautiful she was and amazing she was. Doesn't feel like I'm on, but maybe I am. Not loud. Coming. Well, that's because you can hear me. Okay. It's been recorded, so this is good. All right. Verse 2. We'll read it. So it says, I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. I have taken off my robe. How can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. My heart leapt up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen who went about the city found me. They struck me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls, they took my veil from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick. So here she has another dream, a dreamlike vision. And she's asleep at this point. Her heart is wakened by the voice, but she's sleeping, which, she's resting. Resting's a good thing, except she's not with the Lord. Her beloved isn't there, so she's not resting in the Lord. And there's a difference. There's a difference with just resting and then resting in the Lord. The two things are completely different. And here she is, she's resting, but it's not with Solomon. It's not with her beloved. And we know that there's, obviously he's gone and she's on her own. There's been some parting. We don't know exactly what happened. There's some indications of, maybe how she's feeling. But one thing that strikes here is that she doesn't really seem to take much notice that he's absent. She's happy sleeping. She's asleep and she's not really all that bothered that he's not there. And so we could, maybe assume what is going on in her mind, that, she's been taken to this place of being the bride, of being his beloved. She could be in spiritual pride because of her position. She could be appreciating the accomplishments that she has. She's got all this wealth before, she's got his love, and maybe she's, instead of being grateful for the grace that has enabled her to do these things, she's taking that pride. Or she could be satisfied more with the blessings instead of the blesser as well. So she's become very self-occupied and self-contented as well. Her excuses in verse 3 is, I have done this, how can I do it? And I have washed my feet, and how can I? There's a lot of I's in there. She's making an excuse because she's very occupied with herself, with her own things that are going on. And so she's making these excuses in her mind as she's lying there procrastinating, getting up and answering the door. And it's really, if you think about it, she's, put it in the context of the situation here back in the time. She would have taken her robe off, which was part of the ritual of going to bed, and washing her feet. They wore sandals and the feet were filthy, so they had to wash their feet every night. So it was a ritual. You don't want to defile them again after washing them. And so here she is, this picture of her going to bed, doing her rituals, and in bed, and he wants to come in. He wants to come home. So he puts his hand on the latch, and then you also have this myrrh that's on the handles of it, which is what they would anoint the handles of myrrh, of the bride, oftentimes, for it was to be scented with. It was also sort of like a love note as well, that he'd been there, and that was his presence there, that he would anoint the handles. And so you have this picture where he's gone, she's going to bed, and now he wants to come in. He's knocking at the door, and he's calling out to her to open this door. But it's at this time where she's gotten ready for bed. She's done all these things, and it's a little bit inconvenient for her. It's just not a good time. There's this that she's just unwilling to act. He's not asking something huge of her. It's not a huge act. She's just got to open the door. So it's not an impossibility of the action. It's not like, oh, wow, you're asking too much. She's unwilling. It's inconvenient for her. It's not a good time. Previously on the first one where he's calling her to come, and she just kind of, oh, go, you're so wonderful. She's more ignorant of her need for fellowship. So in this one, she's a bit more indifferent. She's a bit more unwilling. The last time it wasn't necessarily willingness. She was just a bit ignorant, just a bit more focused on herself, but more ignorance. But now she's got the knowledge of his fellowship, but now she's just, it's inconvenient. This is a bad time. And, this visit, she's not really appreciating the unexpectedness of that. She's not expecting him, and I think it was, what's his name, Hudson Taylor, he's pointed out, that the door was actually locked as well. So the door wasn't just closed, but it was barred from him. So his return wasn't expected, and it wasn't really anticipated either. She's not really desiring him to, she's locking him out. So there's not this desire. She's not appreciating him unexpectedly turning up. This is a bit inconvenient for her. She's not all too happy. She's not willing to be inconvenienced for her Lord, for her beloved, for Solomon. She's not willing to get up and get her feet dirty for him. And you actually think about it, and in the context of it, it's this whole ritual thing. But actually, if you think about it, okay, I've taken my robe off, how can I put it back on again? Well, you do, you just get up and put it on, don't you? It's not that hard. And I've washed my feet, how can I defile them? Well, it just means she's got to wash her feet again before she goes to bed, and that's just a hassle. So it's just this huge hassle for her. How am I supposed to defile my feet again? Well, it's not really that far from the bed to the door. She can hear him, she can even see him, so she's not going to get them defiled that much. So even in the whole picture of the contents of, they've got really dirty feet, dirtier than ours, it's not going to be defiled that much. And you just think, for dirty feet, you're more bothered about how clean your feet are than fellowshipping with Jesus. Is this where her mind is right now? Her priority isn't fellowshipping. It's, have I got clean feet? I can't be bothered to defile them. It's going to get really dirty. I don't know. I'm going to have to clean it again. And, it's this outward appearance. It's this outward, I'm occupied with myself. This is, not a good time. I can't be bothered to wash my feet again. And really, do you think Jesus is going to be bothered about dirty feet? Would Solomon be that bothered about dirty feet? I go to bed and I don't wash my face. I go to bed with my makeup on, which is horrendous. I know my kids tell me off. You're going to get spots, Mum. I haven't yet, so it's been 20 years, so I think I'm all right. But this is why I don't get it. I'm like, who cares about your feet? I go to bed dirty all the time. Can't be bothered. That's my laziness. I'm looking at him like, woman, what is wrong with you? It's just your feet. But she's concerned. Jesus is not bothered about how dirty your feet are. It is. It's these excuses that we're doing. And it's interesting maybe to look at her heart. It was a bad time, first of all. This is bad timing, right? Really, you could have come a couple hours ago when I was ready for you. I'm not ready for you now. This is bad timing. But is there ever a good time? There's never a good time to fellowship with the Lord. We're so busy. It's always a bad time, And it's also that sign as well as she's not ready, is she? You know, the virgins, some of them slept, and she's not ready. She's sleeping, she's slumbering, she's not ready to meet her Lord. So here she is, bad timing. Just isn't right. But also, sometimes this could be seen as sort of an effort to control the relationship. And we women, we like to control. You know, it's what we do. We're good at it. We don't want to admit that we like to control, but we do. And oftentimes we want to control a relationship, and sometimes with our husbands, in as much as you're knocking, why should I come running? You know, you come home late, well, too bad, late for dinner, I'm locking you out, you know. Get it when it, yeah, this is what I do. Oh, you calling me? I'm not talking to you. Why should I talk to you? I'm not going to talk to you today. I talk to you when I'm ready, and I'm not ready. You know, we like to take control of, particularly with our husbands, but sometimes with each other as well. You know, we can try and control other relationships too. Oh, you're busy. You're too busy for me. I'm too busy for you as well. I'm really busy. My busyness is more important than your busyness. You know, I'm not going to, I don't have time for you. You have time for me. You know, we want to be in control. But sadly, this control, she cuts her nose off to spite her face, doesn't she, really? Because here she is trying to, I'm not ready for you. I don't have time for you. You know, I'm not going to jump when you say jump. I'm not going to do that, you know. Why am I always the one? But when she goes to open the door, he's not there. She loses him. Yeah, she can try to be in control of the relationship, but what is she in control of? She loses her beloved. You know, instead of just getting up and being obedient and going to him. And it shows as well that she's only thinking about herself. She's not thinking about his needs. Right now, she's thinking, she's got time for herself to take her robe off, to prepare herself for bed, wash her feet. But she's not being sensitive to his needs. He desires to be with her. He wants to spend time with her. But all she's thinking about is her comforts and what she looks like and what she has to do. And, you know, she's had a busy day. And to get up again, it's going to be, a bit uncomfortable. She's going to suffer some discomfort. But sometimes we have to do that, you know, to fulfill the need of somebody else. We need to suffer some discomfort. It's going to put us out a little bit. We might need to get dirty. We might need to get our feet, our hands dirty for somebody else, for the Lord. We might have to do that. It reminds me of when I went on a mission trip when I was 15. It was a 6-week mission, and our motto was get dirty for God. And we would be in tents, and you were filthy, absolutely filthy. This is probably why I sleep with my makeup on, because I'm used to getting dirty for God. At 15, I was like, yeah, I just sleep with the spiders, and I wouldn't do it now, but it was fine then. And I kind of, are we willing to get dirty for God? Are we willing to suffer a little bit of discomfort for his needs, for being with him, or for being with the church? You know, and it is only a little bit of discomfort. He was only asking her to get up and open the door. He's not asking her to walk through fire. You know, this is not, it's not something horrendous here. You can barely call it discomfort that he's asking us to do. This is not discomfort. You can get your feet dirty. Come on. But yeah, we might need to suffer a little bit of discomfort. But how worthwhile is his love? How worthwhile is that fellowship that we need to work at? Is it worthwhile, you know, a little bit of work on our part? And I'm talking about salvation, you know, because that's not the work. She's indifferent and she's self-occupied, but she's still his bride. And he's still calling her his bride, so she's still got that salvation, but it's the fellowship. It's the fellowship that she's missing out on. But also one thing that I see in this as well that we might need to be careful of is a little bit of legalism. I mean, is that kind of seeping into her heart a little bit? In as much as she's done her ritual. She's done her thing. She did the robe thing. She's washed her feet. Now, you know, she's done all of that. I've made myself clean. I've done this. This is what my duty to you. And this is a very good thing. But she's more concerned about getting these things right than she is about fellowshipping with her God, than the relationship with her husband, with her beloved. You know, and it thinks about when Jesus, you know, the disciples, when they ate with dirty hands, and then, you know, the Pharisees pointed out, well, look, they're eating with defiled hands. And she's like, it's not what goes in your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes out. It's your heart. That's what defiles you. It's not the dirty hands. It's not the dirty feet. And, you know, the Pharisees, they were so concerned about all these laws, but they would make out that God is pleased with it. God's pleased with you doing all of these laws and doing all these things, and this is how you're going to please God. And so she might be seeping into this mindset of, oh, I'm pleasing you, God, because I'm keeping all of these rules, and and this is a good thing. This is a good thing that I need to do. But God is looking at her heart. Where's her heart? And sometimes we can get so caught up maybe in doing the good things, in doing the things that maybe society says are good, or what we think are good, or the legalistic side of things. Maybe I need to do this to please God. Are we so busy doing these works that we forget that it's a relationship? It's this relationship, and it's difficult. It's difficult to get our priorities right, when we can look at our day, especially at the end of the day, and just think, well, look, I served here, I served there, went to church on Sunday, my week's packed with serving God. I could maybe taught this, ministered to that person, prayed for that person. I've done all of this, checked all this box, and I've done all this spiritual work, and now I just need to rest. But now the Lord's like, okay, now I want you, I want your heart. But now she's, oh no, I need time for me. I need time to rest. No, I've done all my bit, and I don't need that. But the Lord's like, that's not the important thing. The important thing is him. Mary and Martha. Mary sat before the feet of Jesus. Martha was serving Jesus, doing the things for Jesus, but it was Mary, wasn't it, that did the good thing, that actually sat and soaked in the words of Jesus. That was the good thing. And so it's getting those priorities, and it's difficult to get priorities because we want to serve the Lord. And it's not bad to serve the Lord. And we have this, this battle in our minds, how much we're doing for God. And we've got so many things we want to do, and there are so many things that have to be done. So many things we can get involved in, that we can use our gifts for. If the Lord's given us a particular gift, we want to use it. We want to use it as much as we can. We want to glorify him. We want to help out in different things. There's so many things that can stir our heart, tug our hearts, that we want to get involved in. And they're all good things, but we have to make sure that we don't, confuse these good accomplishments with our walk with the Lord. Because they're not. They're a part of our walk with the Lord, but they're not the driving force. It's not the be and end all, and it's not the definition of our walk either. All of our accomplishments, the things that we do, doesn't define our walk at all. It's not a standard to measure it by. The ministry and the service should always come from intimacy in the first place. Our walk with the Lord is being intimate. The things that we do should, from our walk with the Lord, comes from the Lord and being intimate and connected with him. But if those things that we're involved in are causing us to neglect our time with him, to neglect him, then we need to think about whether they really are good or not. I love Oswald Chambers, his quote. He says, the greatest enemy of the life of faith in God is not sin, but good choices which are not quite good enough. The good is always the enemy of the best. And it's true. Sometimes it's not sin. Sometimes it's just little things that are so good to do, but they get in the way of the best. It was good for her to take her robe off. It was good for her to wash her feet. It's a good thing. But her mind being set on that got in the way of the best. Got in the way of her getting up and just having that intimate fellowship with her Lord, with him. So we have to get these priorities. And it is difficult because we are torn, but we have to get the first things first. I don't know if you've ever heard of that tale of a guy. He was a professor and he gets a jar. I don't know if I've taught it before, and I know I've heard it several times. But he gets a jar in front of his class and he says, okay, this is your day. And he puts it with big stones in there. And he fills it up to the top and he goes, okay, is it full? And they're like, well, yeah, it's full. So then he gets gravel and he pours the gravel in that goes in between all the cracks. And he goes, okay, is this full? He says, yeah, it's full. So then he gets sand and he pours the sand in, which then goes in between all of the cracks. And he goes, okay, is this full now? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's full. So then he gets water and he pours the water in and it goes in all the cracks there. And he goes, okay, is it full? I'm like, yeah, it's full. And he goes, okay, so what is the point? Well, some smart aleck turned around and said, doesn't matter how busy you are, you can always cram something else in. It's not the point. The point was, you've got to get the big important things in first, else the rest of it doesn't go in. If you don't get those big rocks in first and you fill it with the gravel and the sand, the big rocks are not going to go in. You'll never get them in. And it's true with our day. If we don't get the most important things into our day, into our week, sometimes we have to look at our weeks, don't we, and plan it out as a week. If we don't get those times in, then we miss it. Then our priorities aren't right. And our first priorities are time with the Lord, alone with him, even if it's late at night, even if it's a little bit inconvenient. That's a priority. But the other priority is he's talking to his bride. And that's one thing we should never forget with Song of Solomon. It's the church, collectively. And that's what Jesus just looks at and thinks is beautiful, the whole church. And so worshiping and fellowshipping together as a church is your second priority. It's those two priorities. I don't know if we can grow fully and to our best if we don't have those two things. If we just, read on our own and we don't have the collective worship, we're missing out on a huge growth. We're missing out on being that garden and blooming for the Lord and, sharing gifts. But if we just go to church and we don't have anything of our own, we're missing out on hearing God's voice, on having that intimacy with him on our own. So we need the two collectively. And those are your two things that are the priority. The other things, if they're good, then great. But if those good things are getting in the way of those two things, it's time to reevaluate. It's time to look at your schedule and just think, okay, what do I need to change? What do I need to alter? What do I need to sacrifice? What do I need to do differently to guard that time, to be able to get up when it's inconvenient and serve the Lord or meet with him and just sit with him and listen to him? Revelation chapter 3 is another one of very similar to verse 2, where he stands at the door and he knocks. And in Revelation chapter 3, you know the verse. He's speaking to the church of Laodicea. And it's interesting because Laodicea means rule of the people. And that's the meaning behind it. And he says in verse 20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him and he with me." Very much the same picture as what's here with Song and Solomon. And so the Laodicea, it means rule of the people, and these people were being ruled by the majority, not by God. And it's interesting because in the New King James Version, all of the churches, the other churches, if you look, they're the church in Ephesus, church in Smyrna, church in Philadelphia. But this one says to the church of the Laodiceans. And it's not the church in it, it's the church of the Laodiceans. The Laodiceans were ruling over the church. It wasn't God. He wasn't in there. Obviously, he's outside. He's knocking at the door. He's not in that church. And this is the lukewarm church as well. It's sort of the half-hearted church, the church that kind of done their duty, but then was just sitting in their own comforts and satisfying themselves. So they were only half-hearted. And it's to this church that he says, "I stand at the door and knock." And he stands and he waits patiently. He waits. He doesn't force his way in. He could do. And it's the same in Song of Solomon. Solomon did not force his way in. He could have kicked the door down. It was his door. He could have gone in, but he didn't. He waited and he asked for it to be opened to him. We have to come and open it for him. And it's strange because actually I've heard that some people would want God to force their way in. I've heard of some people saying, "I wish he would just force me to obey him." But that's not what God's ever going to do. God doesn't want that. But some people do. I guess some people want to make sure but that's not the point. God wants us to obey him. It's not a forced relationship. There's a part for us to play. We're the ones that has to go, get up, and open the door. It's a response. There's a response in us that we have to do, and it's only responsible for us. That action is our choice. It's a choice that we make. If we want fellowship with him, we choose. Like we choose our priorities. It's our choice. We can't just say, "Oh, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. I just don't have time. I'll have to find the time later on." You don't find time. Time isn't lost. It's not something you have to find. It's not like in a drawer or under the settees. Time is given to you. You make the time. The same amount of time is given to absolutely everybody. And the same amount of time that Hudson Taylor had to commune with the Lord is the same amount of time that we have. We've all got the same 24 hours in a day. We don't have to find extra for us. It's already there. It's how we use it. It's this time that we're going to give. It's a choice. How are we going to spend that time? But he says, if you open the door, I will come in to him and eat with him. And that's a promise that he is going to come in. When we open, he comes in. And he wants to eat. That's a promise. That's his desire. That's what he wants of us. He wants to come in and be with us. And maybe sometimes that's why we don't want to open the door. We might be a little fearful of what he's going to see, or what he's going to say. What is he going to require of us? You know, really, if I sit and listen to him, and what's he going to ask me to do? What's he going to see in me? What's he going to point out? He sees it all anyway. So there's no point in hiding it because he sees it anyway. But sometimes we don't want to acknowledge the fact that he sees it. We want to hide. Maybe we are afraid of that close fellowship. Sometimes close relationships can be fearful for people. It's a fearful thing. But he desires to come in, and he wants to sup. He wants to eat with us. And this supper, you know, it's this fellowship. It's not like a quick snack before bed, how we might think of supper. That's not what it is. It's not a quick prayer before you go to bed. You know, thank you, Jesus, for this day. Bless tomorrow, bless kids, bless husbands, bless my work. You know, that's not the supper that he's talking about. He's talking about the end of the day. It would be the main meal. And it's when the man would come home and talk long with his family because his work had been done. There was no work being done at this point. And I really like this picture of Jesus wanting to come and sup with us. Nobody's doing any work. They're just sat, and there's no work that has to be done. So it's not a doing. It's just a sitting and eating and fellowshipping. There's no work. Like when we just sit and worship the Lord and pray and be with him on our own. But even at church, you know, I mean, some of us work sometimes on Sunday mornings. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get to sit. And that's the time when we're fellowshipping with him. We're not working. We're communing. You know, you're fellowshipping. It's that fellowship that's taking place. But he also says, the one who conquers, in verse 21, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. In other translation, it says overcomer. To the one, he's an overcomer. And I find this interesting that it's to this church he says, you can conquer. You can be the overcomer. But we're only overcoming when we open the door and fellowship with him and let him in and let the overcomer come into our lives so that we become overcomers as well. And she needed to become an overcomer, didn't she, the bride? Because she needed, you know, to overcome her selfishness, her self-reliance, her, you know, self-occupation. She's, you know, so occupied with how she looks and what she has to do. She needs to overcome that. But there's so many things that we also need to overcome. And it's to this church that, you know, Jesus is saying, let me in, and together we can overcome. And it's that fellowship. We can't overcome by doing this, doing that, having a program, step-by-step thing. It's just communing with him, fellowshipping with him, opening the door and letting him come in. And the other thing, Charles Spurgeon, he has a great quote. He says, we must not talk about setting the church right. We must pray for grace, each one himself. For the text does not say if the church will open the door, but if any man hears my voice and opens the door. It must be done by individuals. The church will only get right by each man getting right. And I thought that was great. It's the individuals that open it, isn't the church. It's a great thing to find a church that's spiritual, that's encouraging, that, you know, iron sharpens iron. We're supposed to provoke one another to good works, but it's not going to make you good. Going to a good church doesn't make you good. Your choices make you good. And it's by individuals opening up to Jesus that makes us good, that makes us overcomers. You know, again, it's not just by sitting in the church. It's our choice. It's us. We have to choose. We have to open the doors. We have to get up. We have to not think about our own comforts, not think, you know, we have to think about what he desires, what other people desire as well. And when we forget about our comforts, forget about how hard it is, and look on the other person standing on the other side of the door, which was Jesus, which was Solomon. His desire was to be with her. She didn't care about that. She could only think about herself. And so this is what we have to have, that, renewal of our mind. We have to lay down, die to ourselves, and look at Jesus, who is desiring, and look at his needs, look at the church's needs, look at our husband's needs or somebody else's needs, and do it for him. And be maybe a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit of discomfort, and serving the Lord. But back in Song of Solomon, I love the fact that he still loves his bride. He knows that, she's on her own and that she's laying down. She's already in bed. She's gone to sleep without him. He wanted to come for fellowship, but he still loves her. If you look how he calls her, he says, "Open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one." There's nowhere else in the Song of Solomon does he pour out just 4 different descriptions of her. He goes on describing her, but there's nowhere else does he pour out these 4 things, saying, "My sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one." He's just calling her. He's praising her. He wants her to know how loved she is, because he wants to come in. It's not enough, though, for her to open the door knowing that. But it's encouraging to know that he still loves the bride. He's still graciously calling her, wanting her to be with him. But we see that he does in verse 6. "I open for my beloved." Finally, she decides to get up because she sees his hand. She smells the myrrh. She's like, "Okay, I'll get up." She goes, she opens, but her beloved's gone. He's turned away and was gone. Her heart leapt up. "When he spoke, I sought him but could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer." She'd procrastinated too long. And when she opened the door, he was gone. And it's a sad picture and a sad realization too. But it is a realization. It is something that is real. Sometimes with our walk with the Lord, we feel distant because we didn't want to be inconvenienced. We didn't want to get up. We didn't want to die to ourselves. Or we've, gotten too legalistic, and then all of a sudden we feel distant from the Lord, and we feel a bit lost and a bit hopeless, and we wonder, why are we feeling distant? Well, we're too concerned about ourselves, too preoccupied with ourselves than we were with the Lord. And so now that we want him, we feel a bit lost, and we have to go and search for him. But it's the truth as well in relationships. It's very true. Song of Solomon paints a great picture of actually what relationships are. It paints a picture of the ideal, but also the realistic as well. When you shun somebody enough times, they're going to shun you back. They're not going to be there. When you get up and you go to them, you'll find that, they're too busy as well. They were too busy for you. There are other things to do. So when you just keep shunning somebody, pushing them away long enough, that's exactly where they're going to go. They're going to go away. And we see that reality. But the Lord is gracious, and we are going to end it there. We're not going to end it in such a depressing way because the Lord is gracious, and we do know that she finds it, but we don't have time to get into that bit. We're just going to leave it just upon the thoughts of being that bride and of not being the bride who doesn't want to be inconvenienced, who's more concerned about, how clean she is and how pretty her feet look, than fellowshipping and having a relationship, because it's the relationship that is the driving force of our being. It's not the accomplishments as such. It's that relationship that we have that's going to last. That's the lasting. A lot of our works are going to burn. A lot of things that we do are just for this earth. Day by day, there's probably 99% of what I do in the day is all pretty much worthless. But that supping with my Lord is something that is eternal, that we will take with us to eternity. So it's that we have to align into our lives and just get that perspective. The perspective, right, of doing it for the Lord, of being inconvenienced, maybe getting a bit dirty, but giving it up to him, dying to ourselves. So let's pray. Father, we want to come before you, Lord. Lord, as your bride, as the one you love, the one you treasure, your dove, your perfect one. Lord, you called her perfect, and yet she was preoccupied. She was occupied with herself, and yet you still saw her as perfect. She was still your bride. Her position was the same, even though her fellowship with you had declined. And Lord, I just pray that our minds would be focused upon you, upon pleasing you, upon what your desires are, not ours. And if it's inconvenient, Lord, show us. Show us where we are preoccupied with ourselves and we're more concerned about our looks or our time or our energies. And show us to get our feet dirty, to get our hands dirty, if it means to commune with you, to have that communion, that closeness with you, that walk with you. And Lord, the closeness with the church as well, with your bride collectively. Lord, I pray that we would be inconvenienced for one another, to pursue and to work at that fellowship that we have with each other, that we are sisters, Lord, in you. And Lord, that we can fellowship together and encourage one another and be your bride. Just a beautiful picture of all of us, Lord, being your bride, your loved one. So Lord, I just pray that you would help us to get our priorities right. Those things that nag and tug at our hearts, the things that we feel like are duties that we have to do that are pleasing to you. But Lord, if they're getting in the way of communing with you, Lord, help us to lay them down. Help us to change it. Help us to reorganize our time, rethink things, so that we can get back to communing with you and having that fellowship. Lord, let us not push you away so that we feel lost. Lord, I pray that we do not disobey your voice and ignore your voice or make excuses, that we don't have excuse after excuse, Lord, as to why we just don't have time for you. And let us not come to that place where we finally want you but open the door and it's empty and we have to pursue you. Lord, may we just be obedient to hear your voice and to do it and commune with you. Lord, I just pray for each lady here that you would just give them just a special presence of you, a special anointing, a special communion, Lord. Lord, that they wouldn't just have that fragrance of your presence and you're gone, but they would have a fragrance of your presence because you're there. Lord, bless each woman in your name. Amen.